My thought was to talk a little bit about how to design a computer with the needs of photographers in mind. Photographers have special needs. Among them, the images that we edit are a lot larger than the internet files and correspondence and documents that most people type. And so if you get a computer that is designed for your average user, it's not going to be very satisfying for people who use photography applications. The other thing is different photographers use different applications, and some of those applications are more demanding than others and demanding on different parts of the computer. In fact, within Lightroom and Photoshop, each of those is a bundle of applications and different functions within Photoshop and within Lightroom draw more on the CPU, which is the central processing unit, the traditional brains of the outfit, and others draw more on the GPU, which is the graphics card. So as you start, what you want to have is a computer that will do the kinds of images that you do with the kind of software that you use. You want something that's forward looking, that you're not going to have to upgrade in 6 months or a year, that anticipates where the technology is going so that you can get a little more than you need now, so you're not right back in this bucket again of trying to figure out how to make your computer do the things you want to do. You also want a computer that is balanced between applications or between different software components so that you don't overspend on one component and then underspend on others. And if you had things more consistent, you'd get more bang for your buck. And finally, and this is a big one, and this is probably the most difficult one, you want components that are compatible with each other. You have to have a motherboard that you can plug your CPU into. You have to have different kinds of memory that works with the motherboard that you have. That's just the start. You want things that will fit in your case, and not everything will, depending on what case you use. And so it's kind of a process to get organized enough so that you have everything that's going to work together. Now, what do you need? Well, one way to start figuring out what you need is really pretty simple, and that's to take a look at your task manager. And in order to do that, I want to come over here and share my screen, which is this screen. Okay, you should see a computer screen, and it has a website up for workstations for Adobe Photoshop that we're going to talk about in a minute. Uh,
I
I
don't
hope
see it.
you
I
don't
don't,
see it.
I
All
don't see
right,
it.
we need to make sure we see it.
Uh,
You
oh,
got it?
yeah, it's,
There we
yes.
go.
All right. To open the task manager, I've got my mouse down here at the bottom. I'm going to right click on the little start menu icon, and there's a menu comes out to the side, and go up to task manager. Now, on your screen, this is going to show as just kind of a blur, but what it is a list of all of the applications that you have running. And for your overall computer, it shows how much CPU capacity you're using, how much of your memory you're using, and how much of your GPU is using across the top. Now, that's not going to give you a lot of information here because I'm in a Zoom call. But if you have this on when you're running Lightroom, Photoshop, or some other application that you use, you'll be able to see what's taxing different components of your computer. Now, I'm on the Processes tab. I'm going to go to the Performance tab, which is just one down. And this will show you, for example, each of your components, you can see how much is drawing. This is open onto the GPU. And you can see that it's using primarily the GPU 3D corner. That's where most of your photo processing takes place too. Now, like I say, the demands are very low because we're not processing photos here. But I want to show you how to access this information so that you can take a look at it while you're processing photos and see how your computer is holding up. Now, down below all these graphs, there's a line that says dedicated GPU memory. Okay, this is a 24 gigabyte card, but you can see that it's using about 3 gigabytes for what I'm doing here. Take a look at this when you're running your photos, and you'll see how much video memory on the graphics card your your applications are drawing. And it gives you an idea of how much you need. Now, as I run my applications on this card that I'm using now, which is a 24 gigabyte card, I'm not using anywhere close to 24 gigabytes. I'm using about 10. So that extra 14 really isn't benefiting me most of the time. That's how I reason toward a recommendation for 12 gigabytes of GPU card memory. Now, I had been using a card with 6 gigabytes, and that truly was inadequate. I was having a lot of time where the computer had to switch uh, data on and off of the GPU, and it didn't work very efficiently. So I'm recommending a card with at least 12, 20, gotta say it, 10, 12 gigabytes of GPU memory. And we'll talk about those cards later. I'm going to go up here, click on memory. This is worth having a look at too. Now, this machine has got an insane amount of memory. It's got 96 gigabytes. You can see it up here in the corner. But you want to look when you're running your applications down here at the bottom where it says available memory. And if it's getting to where you don't have much available memory and it's using cached memory instead, that means that the computer needs to load images or needs to load processing onto its memory, but it doesn't have enough. And so if it doesn't have enough, it starts using disk memory to make up for the RAM, the random access memory that it doesn't have. And so it's switching data onto the main part of the computer and onto your hard drive or your SSD back and forth to make up for the memory it doesn't have. That's going to slow your computer. So when you look at this and you see that you've got plenty of available memory when you're running your applications and you're not seeing the cache memory changing, it's going to use a certain amount just because it does, but don't worry about that. Anyhow, if you see that you're running out of memory, that's a real good sign that that's one of the things that's slowing down your processing and you don't have enough memory. We're going up here to CPU in the top corner. Now, yours may not display this way. I've got mine set up to display a separate graph for each of the cores in my 16 core processor. Now, most photo applications, except when Lightroom is making previews, that's the one thing that really draws hard on the CPU. But most of your photo applications don't draw hard on the CPU. Uh, and so you don't need the fastest and most powerful CPU to make your applications run well. The reason I'm showing this screen with the separate cores broken out, some applications are well designed and spread the load over the cores evenly. You'd like that because that's making most efficient use of your CPU. Some applications, most notably some of Adobe's applications, are poorly engineered and do not spread the load out across the different cores. They instead run on a limited number of cores. And you see some cores that are quite a bit higher and some that are doing very little. Here you can see that it's overutilizing some and underutilizing others, but that's not a problem here because we're not running with any significant load. Uh, what we're doing in a Zoom conference doesn't draw much on the resources of this computer. But if you're running Lightroom and Photoshop, trying to optimize images or doing something that really draws on your computer, take a look at this and you'll see how your computer CPU is being utilized. The other thing this will show you with the different drives is how much is moving on and off of which drive. Sometimes that's helpful, sometimes it's not. If you know which drive has your cached memory, has the virtual memory that Windows uses when it runs out of RAM, and you see that drive lighting up for no reason whatsoever, then you know the computer is moving data on and off of that. Maybe more than you want to know. So we'll stop sharing that screen. Now, if you're building application or building a machine for photographers, most of the time you need to talk to other photographers or talk to experts or look at examples of what experts have designed for specifically the needs of photographers. The best place for that is to look at this one. I think, okay, you should now be seeing just my web browser.
Good.
Okay. Okay, this is the website for Puget Systems. It's an outfit up to Seattle that custom makes computers for photographers. And they have a lot of good ideas, and I've drawn heavily on their analysis. I don't agree with all of it, and some of it, frankly, I've felt like I needed to simplify. But they suggest systems for people who are doing this. Here's the two systems that they start out as a baseline. And before you log off, when you see that $5,894.96, know that you can build a very decent Photoshop system for, well under half of that. Uh, but they're telling you which CPUs they're using. They're telling you which graphics cards that they're using. Boy, I disagree with this about a 4060 Ti being an adequate graphics card. How much memory they're using, they're putting 32 in one and 64 in their other. Uh, the cases, the coolers, all of the stuff that they've picked out is there to browse. And I mean, these guys, not like me, these guys really know what they're doing. And so, whether you listen to me or whether you don't, uh, you ought to browse their website and see what they're doing before you make any decisions. The first step in putting together a computer is to decide which CPU, central processing unit, you want. And do you all have my handout? I'm on page 2. It makes it a lot easier if you've got the handout. On the handout, I listed 4 different AMD processors. Between AMD and Intel, they both have good processors, but right now I think AMD is a little ahead of the game on desktop processors, particularly when you consider what you get for what you pay. AMD, in the range that we're looking at, has an 8 core, a 12 core, and a 16 core processor. Okay. They're basically the same processor, just with more guts in it. And more guts means more speed. They also have a not too powerful graphics processor that they call their X3D, that is an add on for the 16 and 12 bit. I'm not sure about the 8-bit core, but you can get 8, 12, or 16 with or without the additional graphics processor. And of course, there's different prices. Right now, the graphics processor, what's it going to be good for a photographer? Well, you're not going to be doing much of your processing on that graphics processor. You're going to be doing your graphics processing on a graphics card. This isn't a situation where you're going to do without a graphics card and just use the little processor that's on the CPU instead. Now, the graphics processors also have some cache memory, and that cache memory can be of some value, particularly with a fast graphics card, because it helps the CPU in sending the graphics card the data that it needs to process. Okay, but that's really only going to help you to a limited amount, and it's only going to help you with a very fast graphics card. The amount of cost premium to get that graphics processor on the CPU, to me at this point is exorbitant. I recently ran prices, and the difference between a 12 core with the graphics processor at $600 and the 12 core without the graphics processor at 520, uh, that graphics processor just isn't worth that difference. I think the sweet spot for most photographers is going to be what I have as number 4 on the list. It's a 12 core processor. It's got plenty of power. One of the machines that I built this year has that, and it does fine. You can drop down if you want to the 8 core, but the difference in price is not that much. Uh, let's let's look here. This is the 12 core on Amazon, and today it's 376. Oh, a word about Amazon. Amazon days are coming just early next month. And as sure as you're sitting there, that they're going to have sales on this stuff. So these prices are going to be probably going down, although this is already discounted pretty good. Uh, the 8 core is 304, so you're paying another $70 to get half again more power. You could probably get by on the cheap with the 8 core, but I wouldn't recommend it when you can get this for such little additional money, and you'll have plenty of power for most of the things you do. I've got the 16 core, but I do weird things. I make really big images, and even at that, I'm finding that the 16 core is underutilized a lot of the time. So I'm not recommending that most folks go up to the 16. I think that the 8 is fine. Now, notice right here, I'm highlighting with my cursor. It says CPU socket AM5. That's probably the most important words on this page because you have to get a motherboard that is compatible with your socket. That's that's where there's just no compromise on that. Now we'll get to motherboards in a minute, but first let's talk about cooling. Uh, AMD recommends that you have a water cooler. There's two basic kinds of coolers. There's like a fan and then a radiator that sits right on top of your CPU. And that used to be good before we got more powerful CPUs that use more electricity and generate more heat. At this point, I think that a water cooler makes a lot of sense. It has a little pump that sits on top of your CPU and a hose that goes to a separate radiator. Let's take a look at one here. Uh, okay, we've got this baby. See, this sits in your case, and then this sits on top of your CPU. And it's got a little fan in it, but most importantly, it pumps water back and forth into this radiator. Uh, I'm recommending this particular cooler, and it's referenced in your materials. It doesn't have any of the fancy lights that gamers like, but it is a really powerful cooler. And it's relatively cheap compared to what some of the other options are. The difficulty with this cooler is that it's big. Now, that just means you have to plan to make sure that your system has room for it. Uh, this, the manufacturer has uh, a compatibility assister here. First thing we're going to look at is this. This tells you how thick your radiator is. Well, that helps when you're cooling, but when you get down here and trying to put it in your case, you want to pay attention to these measurements. The fans are 25 millimeters, and you've got another 38 millimeters of radiator, and a lot of your cases aren't going to have 63 millimeters of space at the top of the case without it interfering with either where your motherboard sits or where the top end of your random or your RAM memory sits. And so that's fine. You just have to know about that. And to make things easy, they have a chart where you can put in your motherboard. Let's say you're building this motherboard. It's fully compatible. Okay, cool. But if you're building some of these Asus boards, uh, here is, this is compatible, but some of them aren't. What you'll see when they're not compatible is they'll show you what the problem is. And the problem can be either this. See, here you've got a M2 cooler that sticks up too high on an Asus board. That heat sink is really more decoration than it is function, but it sits up in a way that the back end of your pump is going to hit it. See, here's another illustration. There's this compatibility and the size of the radiator that can both get you into trouble. But they'll send you a little heat sink that'll fit underneath. They'll send you that, won't charge you for it. Uh, but you have to be aware that you're getting uh, a motherboard that's compatible or plan to use a different heat sink on that. It's not hard to do. It's just a surprise that you don't want to have. But I recommend that cooler because I think it's the best thing out there. Now, motherboards. Everything plugs into the motherboard. The motherboard has to have the same socket as your CPU. Motherboards have different chipsets. Different chipsets determine basically what you can plug in to your motherboard. Now, here on the AMD site, they're listing different chipsets that they have for their motherboards. Different manufacturers will make their boards using one of these chipsets. So you can readily compare motherboards between manufacturers by looking for what chipset they're using. And that's going to be usually displayed in the name of the board. I'm going to work with Asus boards simply because if we start looking at multiple manufacturers, this gets really overwhelming really fast. So I'm going to look at the Asus line. Uh, and this is their top end, and they describe it, and they describe each of these in a way that makes you think that it's the best thing ever. But basically, you get down here, and we're going no further than the B850. And it's going to tell you basically how much capacity it has for moving data across the motherboard, uh, what kind of memory you're going to be able to plug into it, what kind of a PCI bus it has, whether it has a 5 or a 4. At this point, 5 is the new standard. How much capacity it has to handle additional USB plugs. A lot of information here. Basically, uh, pretty simple. The more you spend, the more you get. But, whoop, I wanted to be up here. But you come to a point where spending more doesn't get you much insofar as what a photographer needs. Now, I'm going to look at one of these 870E boards, and then we're going to some B850 boards. On the Puget Systems website, their top end uh, their top end motherboard uh, is the Asus Pro Art. Now let me find it here. And it's $533. I think that's way more board than most photographers are going to get the benefit of. Yes, it's got the high-end chipset and all the little toys. It's also got a uh, a Pantone colors application. And for us photographers, unlike designers, we're not using Pantone colors. Uh, if you were making advertisements for cars and you had to match the color of the car precisely with the color number for the paint that the manufacturer uses, those kinds of fine, precise, essential adjustments, we're not making those. We're making adjustments based on our eye. We don't need that fancy extra set of stuff. Yeah, it's nice, it's pretty, but let's look at something that is more moderately priced, more in line with what we might do. And I'm going to go to this one. Now, when I put together the handout, this board was 229. It's on sale now, I found out. It's 186. That's a pretty significant price drop. This is an example of a board that will suit the needs of most photographers. So let's see what it's got. I can get up here. It's got your AM5 socket, so it's going to work with your CPU. It's got multiple power stages, but not as robust as some of the most high-end boards, but adequate for what we go. It's got DDR5 memory, which is the new standard. This is what you want to be using nowadays. It's got PCIe 5, uh, which is the speed of the bus, the speed of the data traveling across the board uh, from from the memory over here to the CPU to the graphics card to the M2 drives that are also going to be plugged into it. Uh, and it has a 20 gigabyte C drive on the back, which can be kind of nice if you're downloading a whole lot of photos. Uh, it also has a plug on the back that lets you flash the BIOS just from just from using a thumb drive, which can get you out of trouble if you need to flash the BIOS and you don't have other things running. These are all pretty standard nowadays. What it doesn't have, it has LEDs on the motherboard to show you what's working and what isn't. Uh, the next board I'm going to show you has a screen instead that can show you what's working and what isn't. Uh, it does not have a fast charging port on the back. And that's nice to have, but you can buy a fast charging point for under $20, plug it in, run a wire to it, and you've got that running off of the just an AC outlet. Uh, it does not have 40 gigabyte USB 4. Now, I don't have a device that uses 40 gigabyte USB 4, But if you're worried about future proofing your machine, that's something you may want to consider. This machine has a port, or this board has a port on the motherboard that you could plug a card adapter into to get to 40 gigabyte USB-C, but it doesn't have a plug on the back. But at this price, this board becomes pretty much no brainer. I wouldn't expect to get this much board for under $200. So let's see what's next on our list here. Oh, something you got to watch for. Let's go to the motherboard manual if I can find it. No, this is a diagram. Well, let's look at this for just a second. Uh, you can, well, I'm going to go to the manual. I got to get it up here. Here. Before you buy a motherboard, download the instruction manual because it's going to tell you some things that you're not going to get when you just look at the website. First thing you're going to want to look for is incompatibilities. Whoa, right here. Now, this is a brief diagram, and we're going to look at a more filled out one here in a second. Connectors with shared bandwidth. Okay, on this motherboard, you've got a slot here where you can put in an M2 SSD, which is like a little stick that's got memory on it. It's not like your RAM, which is up here. It's just a little flat stick and it works like a hard drive. Well, it is a hard drive, but it runs on the same memory bus as your card slots. Here's your graphics card slot, and here's a second slot. But this slot shares bandwidth with this card. And if you plug in this card, this slot isn't going to work. And you wouldn't know that if you didn't go to the manual and look for these inconsistencies. Most motherboards have them, and they're no problem if you know about them. But if you're planning to use both this M2 slot and this card slot, and you don't know that they're not both going to work, you're going to look at this board and say, wow, it's got just what I want to plug into. And it does. The problem is they don't both work at the same time. Here's a diagram of the motherboard. Now, I don't know if I can make this bigger. Yeah, I can make it a little bigger. All right, that's best. If you haven't looked at a motherboard, it's good to have a general idea of what a motherboard is and how you connect it to everything else in your machine. So, on this particular motherboard, you've got a socket here. Can you see my little cursor on number 1? That's where your CPU goes. And to put it in, you release this little spring lever, lift it up, lay it in very carefully so that you don't damage anything. Close the socket, and the top pops off of this, and your CPU is installed. On top of this, you're going to put a cooler or either one of those in the case radiators or a pump that goes to a radiator at the top of your machine. These 4 slots here are where your RAM memory goes. Now, RAM memory comes in pairs of 2 sticks. If you're getting 32 gigabytes of RAM, you want a 216-bit or 216 gigabyte package so that you'd put one in this second slot and one in this fourth slot. And so you have 2 slots open. That means that if you get 32 gigabytes and you decide that you really should have had more, you could get another set of exactly the same memory and put it in these 2 slots and double the amount of memory that you have. Some motherboards are going to come with only 2 of these memory slots, and you don't want those boards. You want the flexibility to be able to add a second uh, a second kit. Now, what else do we have? Well, this is the slot where the graphics card plugs in. This is that second slot that I mentioned that's inconsistent with this M2 slot. You have another M2 slot here, another M2 slot here. Now, this M2 slot is a M25, which is your fastest M2 SSD now. Okay, these down here are fours. Most of the M2s that you're going to get nowadays are fours. We're going to talk about M2s in a minute. But this is where those plug in, and they plug in sideways and flat against the board. Over here, you've got fan connectors. Your pump plugs in here. Your fans on your radiator plug in up here. You're going to have additional case fans. Here are your three little indicators, lights to tell you what's working and what's not working in your computer, number 18. Here's one of the power connectors for the motherboard. Here is the other two. Now, these each have a separate cord going to them, and as I'll explain later, you've got to get the right cord into them. These are connectors that are going to go to the front of your case. One is for well, they're both for different kinds of USB plugs. Uh, this plugs in to the switches on the front of your and the LEDs on the front of your case. There's a wire that will go in and connect to that. It may be one wire with a plug that's the size of that, or it may be individual little wires and you put the right plug on the right pin. Here's some USB plugs that you can use to plug to the front of your case. Uh, Here are some more fan headers. These ADDG2 threes, these are for lighting. Gamers like fancy lighting on their cases, but I ignore those. Here's where you plug in your audio to the front of your case. Over here, you've got the plugs that are on the back of your case, and we'll go through those just in a second here. And the description in the instructions is really pretty good for helping you know what wires go where. So here on this one, we've got a couple of video ports. We've got different kinds of USB ports. I think these are the sixes are tens. These are fives. Here's your Ethernet port. This is a USB-C port. Here's a bunch more. This is where a Wi-Fi antenna can be plugged in. This is a button to use when you need to flash your BIOS, and you can plug a thumb drive with a new BIOS into one of these, and I can't remember which one, but the instructions tell you, and update your BIOS from the back of your computer. And these are audio plugs. Now, the one other thing I want to go down here, this shows you how to install all this stuff. But when we get to the M2s on page 4, where'd it go? Well, I'm not finding it as quickly as I wanted to, but there's a notation that tells you about the inconsistency because the M2s and the PCI bus run off the same resources. So that's kind of an introduction to what a motherboard looks like, how you plug things into it, and what this particular motherboard has to offer. Now, if we go to Okay, let me get to the right screen here. I've got a lot of these and I want to get to the right one. I want this one. Let's say you don't have enough M2 slots on your computer. This is a card that plugs into that second card slot that you can put four M2 drives into. I'm cautious about these. Some people say they work pretty well. Some people say there are special things that you need to be concerned about. If you've got a motherboard now that doesn't have M2 slots, you can get a card like this, but you have to make sure that the bus on your motherboard is fast enough to run the card. And this is kind of complicated. I'm not going to go through it all here, but this is a uh, this is for a PCI 4 bus, and your older cards are probably going to be that. If you don't have even that much, if you have a 3, this stuff's probably not going to help you. Why are we worried about M2s? Is because they're fast. I mean, they are really fast. And again, we're going to talk about that again in just a second. I wanted to show the second board. There's a second board that I have listed in the materials. The uh, the gaming Wi-Fi for 349. Uh, it just shows that if you go up a step, and that step just got a lot more expensive, you can get a board that has the fast charging and has the screen. Uh, but I can't see that for the difference in price. You also can go down. These are the B650 boards. They have an older, less powerful chipset. I don't see any reason to go down to that stuff. Uh, but there are options, and the options get really confusing. Next question is memory. I talked about memory some, and you want to have, I think you want to have at least 32. I don't think that you want to play around with 16 because, based on my experience, uh, I'm over 16 most of the time, just about all the time when I'm working photos, which means your computer is going to be using the virtual memory, swapping data in and off of the hard drive to make up for memory it doesn't have pretty much all the time. Not good. 32 is going to run a lot of things well. You may go over some, but you're not going to be going over a ridiculous amount. Uh, I think 48 is probably about where most photographers ought to be, but 2 times 24 sticks are hard to come by. You might decide that you want to get a 32, and then if you find that it's not enough, you can add a second set of identical memory and make it a 64 gigabyte machine. Uh, all you got to do is buy the stuff, plug it in, and you're there. So that's a way to decide after the fact and make up the difference if you want to. The memory has to be compatible with the motherboard. This is a big deal and it's easy to screw up. Uh, the AMD has an accelerator routine uh, that enables the memory to get to its advertised speed. Now you'll see that these particular sticks, it's a 2 by 16 package for 32 gigabytes. It's it's rated at 6400 MTS, which is kind of the high end of the sweet spot. The sweet area is between 64 and 56. You get below 56, you're going to start to notice some difference from slower memory. Going up from 64 isn't going to get you that much bang for your buck. But I put this one up as a relatively higher end memory that is compatible with these boards. When you're looking at compatibility, this number here, F5-6239G3239G116GX2 TZ5NRW. That's what you look at for compatibility. And that has to match exactly. Now we're going to look at compatibility on a different slide here in a second. But I wanted you to notice, first of all, this is 32 gigabyte kit for $127, $128. It's a little more than most. Another drawback to this, it's a little faster, it's a little more money. It's also a little taller. Uh, if it's taller, that means you're more likely to have it running into the way of something else, particularly your radiator. I've got to cough here. Sorry. And so if you've got lower profile memory, memory that doesn't stick up as high, it's probably going to be better for a photographer. Why does this memory stick up? Well, it sticks up because it's got fancy lights on it, because gamers like fancy LED lights to show off their memory. We don't need that. That's one of the reasons that this particular set of memory costs more than some of the others. Uh, and so you can get 64, or let's see what else we've got here. We've got this. All right. Here we're down 30 bucks, 20 bucks. Anyhow, we've got 6,000 speed. We've got $104.99, and we've got memory that doesn't stick up and doesn't have any of those fancy LED lights. This is a better choice. Whatever choice you're going to make, as I say, it has to be compatible with your motherboard. And so if you go to the website for your motherboard, and I've just picked this one because we've been talking about it, but we could pick any one. It's going to give you a list that goes on and on and on of compatible memory sticks from different manufacturers. Let's say that we are looking for G-Skill memory. Let's say we're looking for a 32 gigabyte pack. We want Expo support because Expo, okay, I got to go back to Expo. I got halfway through explaining it and I didn't. If you put this stick in of 6,000 speed memory in your motherboard and you don't have Expo turned on, it's going to run at 48, which is slow because that maximizes the compatibilities. If you want it to run at its designated speed, AMD has a routine called Expo, which is like a memory accelerator, but it's pre-programmed into your motherboard. You turn that on, you have to turn it on to get the rated speed of your memory. That's why you want Expo in your memory so that it will correspond with the Expo utility that's in the BIOS of your motherboard. You got a lot of these different, and each one's got a number. Find one you like, go to Amazon or go to Newegg, copy this, paste it into the search, and see if they have it. See how expensive it is. That's how you shop around for compatible memory. Or you can go to the memory company's website, and they will let you plug in what motherboard you want. And I've got the same motherboard plugged in, and then search for their memory that is compatible with that board. Now, I don't care which way you do it, but under no circumstances buy any memory that isn't listed one of these two ways as compatible with your motherboard. This isn't hard to do, but it takes patience And you just have to make sure that you're getting this number or the number on any of these. Golly, there's a lot of options, aren't there? Uh, so that they will fit together and the BIOS in the motherboard will know how to handle the memory to get the most out of it. So there you go. That is the trick on buying memory. How much memory you need? 32 to 64. If I've got 96 in this machine, and that's because I like to play with really large panos. Most people don't need that. Hardly, I don't need that, but I like it. Uh, but if you've got 64, you've got more than most people are going to use. Now, hard drives. In the old days, we had a hard drive that was about the size of a sandwich, and it had a disk inside that spins around and around, and a little arm that reaches out and reads what's recorded at different places on that disk. Those still exist, uh, but the future, the and they plug into the computer in into the motherboard. There's a separate cable for each one. Okay, these are SATA hard drives. There's also SATA SSDs, which are a little smaller box, oh, about the size of a pack of crayons, only one crayon thick. Like if you're getting a 8 box of crayons, about that size. And they plug in the same way, and they're faster and a little more expensive than the hard drives with the rotating disk. But they're still limited in speed by the SATA protocol. You're only going to get, well, theoretically, uh, uh, a, about the same. Well, you're going to get even less for a hard drive, but nowhere close to what these guys are going to do. This is the third type of hard drive. It's not a hard drive anymore. It's a stick. And this is an M2 stick, and it sticks into your motherboard and runs on your PCI bus, which we've been looking at before, where those motherboards had plugs on the motherboard for SSDs. That's what one of these looks like. Now, these are a hot commodity right now. There is a lot of competition. There's a lot of uh, new M2s coming out, and these things get discounted. They go on sale quite frequently. So I will bet with Amazon days coming, you're going to see this for 250. I mean, you're going to see significant sales on these. Uh, do you need a heat sink? Probably not on a motherboard that already has a heat sink built in. Most of the new motherboards do. If you don't have a heat sink on your motherboard, you probably need one, but your motherboard probably has one. Uh, how big do you need? Well, I'm suggesting that you get a 4. That's going to give you room for your operating system. It's going to give you room for your primary programs, room for your cache, both for Windows and for Lightroom and Photoshop, and a reasonable amount of space for editing photos. If you get a 2, you're not going to have enough space. So don't cheap out and get a 2 for the price is going to come up here 149. Yeah, it sounds great. You need a 4. This adding one of these, if your computer does not have an M2 drive, adding an M2 will do more than any other thing you can do to speed up your computer on a dollar for benefit basis. These will load your operating system in much quicker than coming off of any of the other systems. They will move data when you need virtual memory. They will move your images. Image files are relatively large. If you're processing DMGs, they're very large. They're 100 to 200 uh, gigabytes. No, megabytes per image. This is really going to speed things up. It's well worth the money. Which one to get? Uh, there's all kinds of quality out there too. This particular one, the 990 Pro, and Pro is important because they have another line that is inferior. Uh, you know, prices are competitive. This is the top end. Uh, what do you get with this? It also comes with software that will optimize and what they call over provision your drive, which is to provide a little extra working space on your drive to make it work better. And you can plug one of these in your machine, put your old hard drive in on another plug, and it will move your operating system and files and your programs over from your existing hard drive into this. And it will do it so slick and automatic, you won't even have, all you got to do is just tell it to do it, and it will do it. Uh, I've used that, and it's really convenient. Now, that begs the question of whether you ought to just move this stuff over or whether you ought to do a clean install of Windows. But they've this particular company has it figured out, and this particular card it does it very well. This is a 4, a PCIe 4. Okay. And they're giving you sequential speeds of 7,500. Okay. Your programs don't read and write sequentially. So the actual speed you're going to get is going to be a lot less, but it's a good way to compare cards. And it's going to be, like I say, faster than any SATA card. What if you go up to a 5? What if you go up to a PCIe 5? Well, that's the future. And here it is. But you've gone from $300 to $450. You've got double the speed, but these things are already so stinking fast that you're probably not going to notice that speed difference with the applications we currently have. And so you want to have a motherboard that will accommodate the PCIe 5 sticks. But if you're buying now in the current market, the difference in price doesn't get you that much bang for your buck. I would buy a 4. Now, that could all change next month because these things are coming out, a lot of new ones, and there's going to be price competition to drive this down. So, what do we go to next? We've done, storage drives. Is there any role anymore for a plain old ordinary hard drive like this one? Well, yes, there is. Now, I bought one of these recently and paid $200 for it. So prices are competitive. Check Newegg, see what you're going to get. But let's look at this. I paid $200 and I got 10 terabytes of space. Now, photographers accumulate piles and piles of photos, and you're not going to be able to keep all of your photos on a fast SSD. You're going to need some serious storage. This is one alternative. Uh, Other alternatives include a network attached storage device, some kind of cloud system, but you're going to need something other than a single SSD to store your photos. This is really cheap. I mean, if you pay $200 for this, you get 10 terabytes. It's also noticeably slower. But if you're looking at a place to store photos as distinct from a place to work photos, uh, adding something like this makes sense. Also, you can move the drives over from your old machine uh, and plug them in. If you've got enough plugs, they should work. It should, as long as they're SATA drives, which all the newer drives have been, uh, why throw away storage that you already have that's working? You can plug it in. As you probably saw, I've got multiple drives plugged in that I use just to increase the amount of capacity that I have. Uh, you may have existing hard drive that you want to bring in. Hard drives don't last forever. These are mechanical devices. Well, none of this stuff lasts forever. And there is an argument to be made for replacing your hard drive with something new if it's been in your machine for 10 years. Hard drives also come at different qualities. This particular one is a relatively high end hard drive. You're also going to see hard drives out there that are made for for NAS boxes for storage, not in your computer, but in a storage box that's separate. It's kind of important to get one that's supposed to be in your computer, although they'll work. They come in different sizes, but you want relatively high end storage because what it's storing is valuable to you. Now we're going to talk about graphics cards. Uh, if you thought motherboards were crazy, graphics cards are really crazy. As I said before, I think that a graphics card with 12 gigabytes of memory is about the floor if you're buying something for photography. These these things can readily be compared on a benchmark site that describes this is NVIDIA, their RTX, AMD, their RX. This particular site is useful, however, it's opinionated. Not always do I agree with their opinions, and it is it is tuned to gamers, and it doesn't take into account what photographers do that's different, which means we don't benefit from a whole load of extra memory, but we do benefit by having at least 12. Uh, so you got to kind of take their stuff with a grain of salt. Let's talk a bit about numbers. This is an RTX NVIDIA 2060. 20 is the generation. The current generation is 50. So if you have an RTX 20, it's 30, 40, 50, three generations older than the current cards. It's an easy way to compare. Now again, just like the memory, just like the chips that go in the motherboard, NVIDIA and AMD, most of their cards are manufactured by third-party card companies. But you compare the cards by what chip is in them and what memory is in them, because the cards from different manufacturers are pretty interchangeable as long as they've got the same guts in it. 60 is the performance level. For our purposes, that's the low tier. Now, this is RX 7900. In AMD, the 7 is the generation, and the 9 is the performance tier. And RTX 7700, for example, would be one tier faster than the 60. The 6 and the 9 are performance tier, the 2 and the 7 are generation. Let's look at a graphics card. This is an AMD RX 770 XT. This is an example of a graphics card that would be at the low end of what I would recommend. It's a tier 7. It's got 12 gigabytes on the card of GDDR6, which is not the most fastest memory, but it's quite adequate. Okay, it's more than it ought to be. It's 590, $580, you might as well say. This plugs in the graphics card slot on your computer. It's got plugs on the back for uh, for HDMI and data port uh, leads to go to your monitors. It's really pretty simple. It's Radon, which means you're going to be using AMD drivers, which are, frankly, not quite as good, but pretty good enough compared to the NVIDIA drivers. Let's look at an NVIDIA card. In fact, let's look at two NVIDIA cards. Let's look at this one. Uh, no, that's the same one we had. We're going to look at this one. Okay, we're up $30. We've got a fairly similar current generation NVIDIA card with 12 gigabytes of GDDR7, which is one step faster memory. And these boxes look so similar, you really have to read to know what's in them. This is $604. If I were choosing between this and the AMD card right now, I'd pay the other $30. I want to show you on the card. Okay, there's the outputs, but what I want to show you is the power plug. Boy, I'm not seeing it on this one. I'm going to go to back to where we were on this one and see if we got a slide to the power plug. Okay, right here, this matters right here. There are two different kinds of plugs for graphics card. The older cards and the current AMD cards are using this two 8x2 cables. You plug two cables into that. This has been the standard for a long time. Now we're going to look at the NVIDIA card. You're going to see a different cable. You have We're going to get to talk about power supplies here in a minute, but if you're getting a newer AMD card, you need to make sure that you can plug in to the power plug that you're going to have on your particular card. Now, let's go to this. Oh, the price went up. We're now at $699. Gigabyte has two models of these graphics card, and there is not a spit worth of difference between them. This one's a little bit more oriented to gamers. It's got the magic word OC, overclock. You don't care. Photographers aren't going to care. And they're getting almost another $100 for it. And it's an Amazon choice. Well, I put this up here. There's a little difference in the speed and the clock speed of the card. You wouldn't notice the difference. I don't think a gamer would notice the difference. But this is an illustration of how carefully you have to shop in order to not end up paying more than you ought to pay. Here, right here, is a different power plug. This has got a 12x2 600 watt plug. This is the future. You just have to make sure when you're buying a graphics card that you have a power supply that's going to have the right plug for your graphics card, or you can get an adapter where you can plug two or three of the old plugs into this adapter and then it comes out as this. You've heard stories, you may have heard stories of these melting. I wouldn't fool around with it. I would get a power supply that was made to plug into this and not get an adapter. But that's a difference worth noting for compatibility. Now, what are we going to show next? Oh, we're just going to take a quick look at this. At least I thought we were. Here it's coming up. This shows these two graphics cards we were just looking at. And when you show the difference for $100 difference, what are you getting? You're getting a very minor 5,012 megahertz or 2,512 megahertz to 2,542 megahertz uh, speed in your clock speed. Like I was saying, that is nothing to us. And it just shows how careful you have to be when you're buying these cars. Everything else is the same. Everything else is the same. Uh, but you can easily flush $100 down the toilet. Now, where are we going next? We're going to power supplies. How much power do you need? Well, you need enough. That sounds like a really simple answer. But if you don't have enough, then everything in your computer is not going to be functioning at its best, and it may not function at all. It may uh, kick out on you, it may be damaged. You want enough. But what if I have too much? Well, nothing. Uh, all of these power supplies will throttle down to the load that you're actually placing on it. So there's no harm in having too much. There are websites that you can go to where you put in your components and they'll add up and give you an estimate of how much power you need in order to run your machine. Uh, you want some extra in case you buy something new and you plug it in and you want to have a little bit of upside. You don't want to be replacing your power supply needlessly. You want the right cables. This is the power supply that you're going to see in the machines that Puget Systems builds. It's a 1,300 watt power supply, and it's got a lot of the efficiency data that you'd like to have. Uh, but it's also got the ATX 3.1 cable, which is the new style of cable that goes into motherboards that will carry more power. It's got the PCIe 5.0 W12 VHP power cable. What that means is it's got the cable that plugs into the new NVIDIA drives. Excuse me. So this has got everything that you could possibly ask for. The question is, how much power do you need? 1,300 watts is a little high. Uh, Most people, unless they're using a very, very high end graphics card like a 5090, aren't going to have any use for 1,300 watts. NVIDIA recommends 1,000 watts as the floor for their new fancy graphics cards. And if you move from this uh, at 219 down to well, they've got one here for a 201. Let's move to this white one here. It's basically the same power supply, but it's white. Who cares? It's going to be inside the case. And it's 1,000 watts. And see, you've saved quite a bit of money. You can go down another level for 160. You can get an 850. If you're building a low end machine, you can get by with 850. You can probably get by with your old power supply, uh, or you might. But if I were buying new, I would be probably at the 1000 watt level, unless you're going with a really high end machine. And you're not going to find better power supplies for the price than the super flower power supplies. So we're getting toward the good stuff. Now we get to talk about case. Why does the case matter? Well, case matters, first of all, because you've got to be able to get everything in your case. You've got to have room at the top for your radiator. It's nice to have room in the back. There's a plate that the motherboard sits on, and then there's area behind the motherboard between the back wall of the case. That's where you try and put your cables if you can, so it doesn't clutter up the front end of your case. You sometimes can put hard drives back there too. It's nice to have a little extra room there. Uh, so the case that Puget Systems recommends is this one. It's the Define 7 from Fractal Design. Now, I looked at a lot of cases before I bought this. In fact, the other machine that I built had an Asus case that I will never use again. And they have different sizes and they have different styles. But this is just a really basic case. It's got two fans here. It's got one fan in the back. I added another three fans. It's got filtering. It's configurable inside so that you can basically set it up any way you want it. If you want to put in a CD up here, I wouldn't bother, but it's one of the few cases that has a slot for it. It's got lots of connectors up here for USB, USB-C. Uh, it's got your sound. It has a reset button that a lot of them don't have. And the really great thing of it is, if I can get some nice pictures, not getting nice pictures. Oh, it's easy easy to route cables and easy to set up with different configurations. So I'm thinking this case is $179, $180 at Newegg. Newegg seems to have this case in stock better than Amazon. It's a little more expensive than most cases. It's even got sound insulation in the sides. You can get one with steel panels on each side for 180. You can get one with tempered glass on the edge here, uh, so that the gamers can see what they got inside. You don't want that. You just want an ordinary case. They've got different sizes if you don't want one quite this big, but Fractal Design cases are easy to work in and they're very configurable. They are where I would start if I was looking for a case. Now comes the question of, when you decide you're going to build a PC, do you want to build it or do you want to pay somebody else to build it? First of all, you've got to find somebody else. If you're going to have someone else do it, they've got to be willing to work for a reasonable price. I'm thinking, based on looking at the web and how much work is involved, that $75 to $150 ought to be enough to pay someone to build a case or to build a system for you, plus you buy the parts. Uh, but it's not that hard to assemble your own computer. I showed you where the plugs are on the motherboard. Things screw together with a Phillips screwdriver. Good idea to have a couple of different kinds of pliers. There's a few other little things you need. You need a good flashlight. You need lots of patience. Uh, you need to be ready to walk away and come back. And you need to be willing to look at your instructions that come with the motherboard and watch a few videos. And you should be able to do it. But before you start, you really need to prepare with your old computer. You can, as I say, use the utility that comes with the Samsung M2s to move your old C drive onto what would be a new C drive, a new M2 C drive. You also can do a fresh install of Windows, and you can do that for free if you're currently running any version of Windows back to Windows 7 on a 64-bit machine, not a 32. You have to install the same version. In other words, if you're running home, your new install needs to be home. If you're running pro, the new install needs to be pro. But you can download the whole Windows installation, put it onto a thumb drive. There's a routine for doing that. It's a special kind of putting it on so that it will recognize that it needs to install from that and set and do a clean install. What does a clean install do? It enables you to get rid of a lot of the garbage that you'd otherwise carry over from your old machine, your old sound drivers, your old motherboard drivers, uh, programs that you haven't used in the last 5 years. None of that will carry over. And then you can reinstall just the things that you want on your new machine. But in order to be able to do the clean install, you're going to need your old uh, number, your old license number from Windows. Get that before you disconnect your machine. If you have old owned Adobe programs, they are really bad as far as bringing things over from your old machine. Even, if you change your motherboard or change your GPU, even if you have the same disks, that stuff's unlikely to work unless you go into those programs before you turn off your old machine and what do they call log out of them. Just say, I'm going to look for the right word for it. You need to basically disable them so that it's not using that installation to count against you on the limited number of installations that you have on that program. Adobe, it's two, and you can easily burn through those. Other programs, get your license numbers so that if you have to install or you want to install, you've got what you need and you don't have to pay for new software. If you install new, you're going to have some things that's going to take some tinkering to get working again. It's amazing how many changes a person makes in their software over the years, customizing Lightroom, customizing Photoshop, uh, loading plugins, all of that stuff you need to be prepared to move if you want it on your new machine. And it can turn into quite a project. So when you get your new machine, either your old software comes with it or you get new, you need to get everything working. That means going into the BIOS, turning on Expo. You probably want to turn on some overclocking features as well. You want to make sure your security things like TMP and secure boot are turned on your motherboard. You want to use your BIOS to optimize your fans for your cooling. It's a good idea when you're plugging those fans in to make into the motherboard to make a little diagram of which fan is plugged into which plug so that when you get to optimizing your cooling in your BIOS, you can tune different fans and know which ones you're adjusting. Uh, you're going to want to download the drivers for the motherboard and for the CPU chip. Usually those are paired together at the motherboard's website, and any other peripherals that you're using. Things like the color calibration for your monitors, uh, usually your mouse and your keyboard will have separate software that you need to get installed. You need to get your backup working. Uh, you need to make sure if you have more than one M2, if you have more than one drive in your computer, you need to go to the Windows virtual memory settings, which I've talked about in the handout, and change the virtual memory setting to use your fastest M2 drive exclusively. Otherwise, if you have some older drives, it may be trying to use those and you get the full benefit of the M2 if that's your virtual memory source. Uh, and once you get all that going and everything is wonderful, you can enjoy your new machine. So it's time for questions. Is anybody awake?
Yeah, I'm here. Um, there are a couple of things I was thinking about. Uh, because I was looking at my settings on my machine and stuff, and I actually have an FC case. I had upgraded my computer less than 2 years ago, and I'm running an RTX. You'll pardon me. I don't remember the names of things very well. It's a 3060
A 3060.
or 3060
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
with 12 gigabytes of RAM. I basically bought a gamer machine already
Yeah.
built.
You
Yeah,
know, every machine they sell nowadays is a gamer machine.
yeah, yeah.
They know people like that word and they slap it on machines that are totally inadequate,
Right.
but it helps them sell machines.
Yeah. But
Anyhow,
anyway, and I have I'm trying to think. There was something you talked about the memory. And I'm running 32 gigabytes of memory. It came with 16, but it turned out my son had another chipset of, I think that's what you mean by chipset is the memory
the sticks, there's memory
stick
sticks.
sticks.
And the
And so
worry I have, if you put your sons in, they've got to be the same.
they were. He
Okay.
checked. He checked. He's built machines and stuff. So when he put them in, he said, "Yep, these'll work," and they do. They seem to work fine. So the 16 was not adequate. I got much better results with 32.
Hmm.
And you were just talking about something that now I can't remember what it was. But anyway, yeah, I reached the point with my old machine that I couldn't install the latest version of Photoshop on it. It did not have enough uh, RAM, enough memory. And
And
so,
probably not enough video card.
no. Oh, and that's the other thing that video card really works pretty well. I have an SSD card in the machine. It's 1 terabyte. I have a 2 terabyte or 4 terabyte external or internal hard drive and then I bought a 16 terabyte hard drive and that's where my photographs live and it's a fast hard drive. The read write speed on it was something I really looked at, and so when you talk about upgrading a machine, that's why it's worth buying a better hard drive with the fast read write speeds to it. And so that's one change that I made to my computer, and that helps a lot with those because I'm shooting with that Canon R5 and those are 45 megapixel files coming off of that camera, and that's it's hard for a computer. It'll choke on it if you don't have something that can handle that. So
That's
anyway,
exactly.
I know there were probably a couple of other things I thought of, but now I've forgotten. So I'll shut up.
I,
Maybe somebody else wants to talk.
I appreciate you mentioning the 3060 video card. Uh, I had used a 2060, which is the prior generation,
Mhm.
with 6 gigabytes of memory on the video card. And uh, maybe it's the programs I'm using because both Topaz and also the DxO Photo Lab I
Mhm.
use an edition, and those are very intensive on the video, yeah, on the graphics card. And my machine was getting to the point where it was, it would run it
Hmm.
if you had a week. Uh,
Yeah.
and I appreciate your experience with the 3060. If it has 12 gigabytes, it might be a 3060 XT because
Okay.
a lot of times they'll run a second version that has a little bit more memory, and that could be adequate for a lot of people.
I,
But if you're running these other programs, the the Photo Lab and especially Topaz, they really put a lot of demand on your video card, and the card that you have might not be adequate for those people.
okay. I did think of one thing. I had problems with my operating system with Windows, and I did a reinstall where you can do that and it preserves all your data. It just update re does a new install, and I had to do that, and that seemed to clean up the issues I was having. It was my computer was literally freezing and not working. And after I did that, all of that went away. And it may be some of those legacy programs you were talking about. So I did note that maybe that I had other stuff that was causing problems. Anyway, my
Now,
experience with my computer.
the first machine that I built this year, I did a complete install. Uh, when I rebuilt my own machine, I moved the old operating system over because I was already running Windows 11. And in retrospect, I wonder if I would have been better off to have started new. It was easier, uh, but I still had to go through and clean out a lot of junk. So, who else has ideas and questions?
I do.
All righty.
Okay. Okay, my machine uh, seems to work pretty well for what it does and what I've run. I do press it quite a bit in some ways. So I wanted to, there've been times where I've lost access to, well, things just started acting really wonky. So it got to the point where I had to reload Windows onto my system. And boy, I'll tell you, that is an experience I don't enjoy because of all the oh by the ways that you come up with. This doesn't work and whatever. So my daughter got me um, another drive for backing up my system. So in case I did lose Windows, I could go back to that. Somebody told me that they needed to be the same size drive. So my C drive, solid state, I think is a 1 terabyte. And she got me a 2 terabyte drive, and I was told that they had to be the same. So I haven't really cloned my drive. So now I'm starting to get a little wonky again, I think. Um,
So
and I'm wondering how to work.
this new drive is an external hard drive.
It's an SSD, but yeah, it's an external drive.
Okay, then you don't need to have the same size. If it's larger, you can just copy over what you have on your existing C drive or whatever part of it you want to back up onto the external drive. Now, where you need to have the same size is if you're doing a RAID configuration and you have two drives in your computer that are mirroring one another. Then those have to be the same. Uh, but anymore, I've done these RAID configurations and I've had bad experience. I'm inclined to say that what you're doing is a better option because you've got it off your machine in a separate place. You know where it is, but it doesn't have to be the same size. You can have extra space on your external.
Okay, so it needs to be able to boot off of this external drive if I do lose my main C drive.
No, I don't think so. If you lose your main C drive, Well, couple things to say. If you lose your main C drive, you're going to be uh, needing to not boot off of it, but be able to move what you have onto your new C drive and have that boot.
Right, right. That's
Yeah.
yeah. That's what I that's where I need to go is how do I make my external C drive bootable in case I lose the one in the computer?
Well, what I would do is if you're starting like that, get get you a get you a thumb drive that you can boot Windows off of, and then boot your computer off of that thumb drive, and then use that to then move the files over that you want to move. It doesn't have to boot off of the external. What it needs, you need to be able to find a way to boot it and then move your files.
Hmm.
So uh, I I wouldn't worry about being able to boot off that external. What you really want in a backup, you don't care so much about the programs themselves. You don't care so much about Windows. You care about what it's going to take to get started on the new machine.
Hmm.
A lot of the programs, and Windows in particular, if you install them over again, uh, you're going to be good. Now, exception being some of these where you're going to get into license conflicts, like the old Adobe software. But if you have that kind of a crash, uh, then I don't know of a way to just have it boot off of your backup. Your backup is going to save the special things that you have done. It's going to save your photos. It's going to save how you've configured your programs, how you've set up your workspaces. Those are the things that you really want to save from a backup. Uh, but if you're in that situation and you have to install, you've lost your Windows, uh, a new install of Windows is probably a good idea because you're going to need a fresh start because something went wrong. I don't
Yeah.
know. Uh,
Okay.
but I wouldn't have that as my goal. Uh, I don't back up my Windows program because I know I can get it off of Microsoft. What I have are my licenses and the customizations that I've done. Uh, if I have to reload Photoshop off of Adobe, uh, no big deal. But I don't want to lose the plugins that I've put in and the actions that I've written, and the brushes that I've got, the special stuff that I've downloaded and saved.
Okay. So how do you create a boot disk, basically, or jump drive?
Go to the Microsoft Windows support pages, and they will show you in detail how the you download the Windows uh, installation that you want, and then there is a little program you run that will put it on your thumb drive, rather than me telling you and only telling you half of what you really need to know.
Right.
Uh, go to Windows. I've done that uh, in the Microsoft website and walk through exactly what they tell you to do, and it's not that difficult.
Okay. Okay. I'm good then. I'll give it a
Well, I
shot.
hope I was some helpful. That's a difficult scenario, but the key part is the backup, and what you want to back up are the things that you don't want to lose that you couldn't readily download uh, from your software manufacturers. You can readily get your Windows, you can readily get Lightroom, but what you can't get are the customizations that you've done.
Right.
Well, I hope this was some help. I'm really glad that everybody came. Uh, Download the handout. That's going to tell you probably in more detail the things that I've said.
Max, I just wanted to thank you for this because you taught me more about computers than I actually wanted to know, but probably need to. So thank you.
You're very welcome. I hope this is helpful.